From Santa Rosa, California, this is 19 Stories. I'm Cheryl Halling.
Disinformation is spreading.
There will be a
We only have
surprise
so many
outbreak.
beds.
Is the issue of
This is
pandemic.
not how I
No
thought I
social
would end
distancing
college.
at all.
We didn't
They
know
said
it
that they would
be
express
this,
their concerns
drastic
about
so
the mask
quickly.
supply. Where's the
One
mask?
expert
Where's the
says
glove?
a second wave is
We all need some good news.
This is a message for all the healthcare workers out there.
Thank you.
If you're looking for hope tonight, raise your hand. If you feel alone and don't understand, if you're fighting the fight of your life, then stand.
Welcome to the first episode of 2022. And for those of you joining for the first time, 19 Stories is about women and men from all walks of life overcoming extraordinary things in their everyday lives. Their will to live, press on, and press through either this current climate of fear or something else, and move into a future filled with hope. We've made it to another year, and I certainly hope you and your family are doing well, and that you are able to enjoy your Christmas and holiday. I realize it may have been a very different one for many of us, as there were family and friends that we may not have been able to gather with, and others who are no longer with us. My husband lost his own mother this December after a long battle with Alzheimer's, and yet we know that she is at peace now. I could think of no better guest to chat with me today than Jen Keefe, who was my very first guest when I launched in the spring of 2020. When I first spoke with Jen, we talked about her being a fellow podcaster, her blogging, a recent move cross-country from where she was living in Denver back to her home state of New Hampshire, being a mother, homeschooler, her voiceover journey, the importance of addressing and caring for our mental health, can I get an amen, and of course, the pandemic, which at the time seemed like we were at the beginning of reopening businesses and life. And yet little did we know that 19 months later, we would be dealing with a different variant. Here we are, and yet there's also been some really exciting things that have transpired for Jen, and we're going to chat about them. Jen Keefe, welcome back to 19 Stories.
Oh my gosh, Cheryl, that was such a beautiful introduction, and I got all just goosebumpy and wet eyes thinking back to that first interview. And now hearing you say the first interview of 2022. And you know what I felt when you said that? Like hopeful. I felt so hopeful. So
Oh my gosh.
I know. I don't know.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So hi, thank you. I'm so glad to be back.
You are more than welcome to be joining me again, and I'm so happy you're here. And the fact that you made that declarative statement, that's actually one of my questions based on your answer to that question in the first episode. But I was going to say, how are you doing today? But you sound fantastic. So I think you kind of covered that. But really, if you want to expand upon that, feel free to.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that, Cheryl, that I sound fantastic, because you're right. I am fantastic. I really, really am. Maybe I'll get you some pictures to put somewhere. We are in the middle of, we just bought which we'll talk about all this. We just closed on a house 2 weeks ago.
Yes, and I was going to ask you about that.
We'll talk about it, but I'll just to bring it down to today, we are in total disarray with painting and taking lights out and getting ready for carpet installation and all this stuff. So it's so funny because yes, I am fantastic. I'm so excited and relieved and grateful and happy. And also I am feeling so displaced and disconnected and really sort of like wanting to take care of myself better, but I have no real place to do that right now. So, but I'm glad you heard it in my voice because I am fantastic. This is temporary.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's good that you know that. And I
Yes.
am so delighted you are joining me again, as your first episode is one of the most listened to episodes. I don't know if you know that. I don't know if I've ever expressed that to you. And one thing I'd like my listeners to know is that if it wasn't for your encouragement, Jen, early on, this podcast, 19 Stories, may never have been launched. So to say that I'm very grateful to you is an understatement, Jen, for helping me overcome my fear that I had and getting out of my getting ready to get ready phase and just launch it. Thank you.
You're making me like cry, Cheryl. That is so awesome. God, I'm so glad you did this second interview, because God, it was such a different time.
And yet I have rebroadcast your interview as a encore presentation because, again, it is truly one of my most listened to episodes. And the feedback I get from you, I mean, I don't, as you know, and I want to talk about your podcast and so much of what's going on for you. But as you know, with podcasting, or maybe not, maybe you had a very interactive audience and people who really gave you a lot of feedback. But sometimes it's just crickets. You don't hear a thing. And other times people do write and say, hey, I'm really enjoying this episode, or this guest was fantastic, would love to know more about her, and so glad that you gave us her information or his information. People are just enthralled and delighted with you, and you have such a strong presence from the get-go. I mean, there's no warm-up. It's like zero, you're like a fine-tuned race car. You're like, hit record and Jen is there, right?
I love that you put fine-tuned, and I'm going to hang on to that because race car I get, but I love that you added fine-tuned. I love that.
Yeah, I didn't plan on saying that, but I mean, that's what came to mind. And
Yes.
so speaking of podcasts, we spoke about real women's work on the initial episode that you joined me on. The impetus for starting that, I'm going to point folks back to episode 1 that launched in July, even though we recorded, I think, in May of 2020. It launched in July. If you want to hear more about that, but tell me where you are to date with real women's work.
Where I am to date is exactly where I was when we talked last time.
Oh, okay. All right, moving on.
Except that I do have guests lined up now, awesome guests that I'm super excited about. I love my podcast so much. Talking to these women gives, as you well know, Cheryl, gives me so much energy and joy and happiness and inspiration and motivation. But I had to let it go for a while. The stuff we were going through, wanting to get my voiceover career going, how the kids were needing me through a really difficult time in history. Good news for me is I've got awesome guests lined up, ready to record, but there's really nothing to report.
I'm so glad you said that, Jen, because I've talked about this before, and I don't ever want to talk about it as a discouragement to anyone listening who's thinking of putting out a podcast, but producing a podcast, unless you have a crew, and even then, it can be a daunting phase. It's work. It's hard work. It's real women's work. It's real men's work. It's, especially if you have an interview format like you and I do, where you have research involved in finding guests and doing the editing process and everything else. And then life comes in. And I'm so glad you took a break from it to deal with the more important things, if you will, that are in front of you, because I've had to do that too. And I've felt really bad about it at times. In your case, you got 2 kids, you got 3 fur babies, a husband, a new home, which we're going to talk more about that. Thank you for touching upon that. When I talk about it, I don't want it ever to be a discouragement, but when other podcasters talk about it, it's a real thing. But that's not to say you can't pick up the reins again and go, all right, I'm launching some more episodes. I was just on a bit of a break, and you know what? Your listeners are going to be there.
It's a pause.
That's it.
And I never would have allowed myself that pause before. Like, it's either you're doing it full force and it's happening, or you're not. Like, that's it. It was a pause. I define it. Nobody else defines it. It was a pause. I love what you just said, Cheryl. It's so true. It's so, so true.
And I love, this is the love fest for everybody who's just joining us.
As usual with us.
As per usual. No, I actually really love that you said no one else is defining it for you. Oh my gosh. And to get to the awareness and consciousness that it doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Yes.
I'm not sure where, I think that's a thing with women, at least the women around me. Like, I'm not sure where that comes from. Like, you either have to do it, be all in and perfect, or go home. And no,
Right.
you just defined how you do your life. And that's what I really enjoy watching happening for you, at least online, since we've last spoken. And from what I've gathered, speaking of online and social media, is that your voiceover work is really beginning to blossom. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, Cheryl, it's, Anne Ganguza calls it, is it Anne who says a multi-passionate-preneur? Like, right? Like, there's so many things I'm interested in, and so many things I love doing. And, after our last episode, when things did look like they were starting to kind of come back to normal, my kids are getting a little older, and I thought, this is the time. I've really got to decide, what are my limited amount of hours for work going to be put into? And I wanted it to be into something that was going to make me money. I love doing all this other stuff. I love it, but it's really important to me at this point in time that I have an income stream.
Mhm.
My daughter's getting older. My son's getting older. I have been so grateful for having options and choices. It's really important to me now at this point that they see me earning an income. That's just really important to me. And I want money. I like money a lot. I really want money. I love being able to say, yes, we can book you a private ski lesson because you don't want a group lesson. Yes, we can do this. Yes.
Or,
Not
yes, you can eat this week. Yes,
uh,
that's you can you
total
can.
100%. But in all truthfulness, Chris was providing most of that, my husband, with his income. We weren't at a point where we were worried about putting food on the table. We weren't at a point where we were worried about a roof. I mean, except for the pandemic when the housing market went cuckoo berserk.
Yeah.
We were renting. We weren't worried about having a roof over their head or putting clothes on their bodies or anything. It was the extras. I wanted to be able to say yes to all the extras. So that was part of the reason I wanted to focus on a money-making endeavor. And like I said, the importance to me of my kids seeing me work and earn an income.
Yeah.
And fortunately, my priority is to be home with the kids. And with voiceover work, my daughter's on the other side of the wall right now, and I'm in my studio. So I don't have to leave them, which is fantastic. So I just drew a line in the sand and said, everything else is going away, not work-wise. I'm
Mhm.
not going to write. I'm not going to do my podcast. My social media is going to be super limited to income producing activities. And I did that. And I mean, like, shocker, surprise, it worked. Go figure. I started working consistently at one thing and it started to do what it was supposed to do. So, and
Awesome.
I did some reinvestment. I enrolled in Mark Scott's playbook. I did some things like that to really give me the skills to know how to be efficient with my time. But yeah, I started booking and getting positive feedback and then getting clients who were rebooking, and it was so freaking exciting.
I'm so happy for you because when I
Thank you.
asked you that we recorded your episode 19 months ago, but it didn't air until about 2 months after I recorded
Mhm.
it. Again, I had your episode, but getting ready to get ready. It's a process, but
Yes.
you were really kind of ambivalent about answering it, and
Yes.
it's because it is a process. I mean,
Mhm.
it is not unless, there are people out there who do this for fun, and if they record something once in a while then and get a little extra pocket cash, they're really happy. But if you're looking at this as an income stream and a business, it is a process. And I try and tell people, if you're starting a brick and mortar and you're hanging your sign out open for business, you don't just have people flooding in. I mean,
That's right.
maybe if you're a restaurant and you're a well-known chef, that might be different. But for voiceover, it's a very different process. And as has been said many, 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 many times, it is not a sprint.
That's right.
It's a marathon. And
Yeah.
so I'm so excited to hear about the exciting things happening for you. And I touched on in the intro about the very exciting, life-changing event that has transpired for you recently. And in addition to what you just talked about with your voiceover, and that is you just closed escrow on your new home.
We did.
And I think it's safe to say that your move back to New Hampshire has worked out for you.
Yes, it has. And I really, I don't want to share too much here because some of it's just personal. But as you know, outside of this conversation, there were a lot of things I was curious about, let's say curious about how it was going to go moving back to the place where I grew up. And it has been such a positive move. I am stunned literally every single day at how happy I am to be back living here in New Hampshire, the place where I so smugly chuckled when people said, "Would you ever go back to New Hampshire?" I said, never. So it's worked out very well. So well that we've decided to put down our roots for the first time in 15 years. Like, we're staying.
That is another kind of epiphany as far as thinking about former places that we've been, that somehow to go back whether it's literal or figurative thought about going back to something, that somehow that's bad. And it's not always. I mean,
No.
I find what you just shared so inspiring, because when you did join me the last time, I asked you what gives you hope. And you partially answered by saying, I don't know what it looks like right now, because we're in a place where we don't have any guarantees of what life looks like moving forward. And now flash forward to now, since that episode aired, and you've just bought a home, which to me expresses a pretty strong hope and belief in a bright future. And if you wouldn't mind, will you speak to how this is unfolded for you?
Well, I was curious whether you meant deciding to buy and put roots down here, or having confidence in the future. Maybe a little of
Both.
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 Yeah.
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 Oh, yeah. Both.
I think I turned 47 in October, which I am so in love with. I cannot imagine going back to any year before this one. And I cannot imagine wanting to be younger than I am right now. I genuinely cannot.
That's so cool. That
I
is
am
so
so in
cool.
love with getting older. It is my favorite thing ever. I love it.
Can I use that as a snippet? Because man, does that need to be broadcast everywhere.
It is just the best.
Especially now, Jen. I mean, really,
Yeah, I know.
especially now. How
Yeah.
cool. Anyway, go ahead.
It's the best thing. And so I think after we've all I think everything has just become more significant these last couple 18 whatever months, right? Everything just feels
Yeah.
deeper and more significant, and
Yeah.
causes more reflection, and it's more meaningful, and birthdays are no different. They're a big day of the year for each of us. And I think turning 47, it just gave me a couple of realizations. Like, in all truthfulness, it gave me the realization of, like, I'm a grown up. Like, and I know how that sounds, but it's just the truth. Like, I'm a grown up. And even though there are some things that I still want to be playful, play has become a huge part of my life. It's something I prioritize every single day now. Play is super important. So I'm not talking about play, but some of the things, that the philosophies I've had, the irresponsibilities, all of that stuff, I just realized, like, I'm a grown up. This really isn't a dress rehearsal. I've done all this personal work to get where I am. What do I want life to look like going forward? Where do I want to be for that? Right here on the seacoast of New Hampshire, right where I grew up, for a whole bunch of reasons. Geography, we have reconnected with old, wonderful friends, and made some of the best connections and friendships since we've been back. And I heard this idea recently of, it sounds like we've heard it a million times, but it's different, of being in charge of your life, of how to be in charge of your life. And in the context that I was hearing about it, it was this idea that we've also heard so much about, which is owning our stuff, right? Recognizing that if an interaction or an event or a situation is upsetting us, that's about us, not the person, the situation, or the event, right?
Reach it, sister. Yeah.
And the way this person was talking about this, it was a book that I was reading, I'll find it and let you know, you can post it if you want, was that is taking charge of the world, of yourself, of life, when you recognize it is literally all 100% up to you. I'm not talking about people having advantage, not having advantage, privilege, that's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I'm
No, I
talking
didn't sense
about,
that's what you were talking.
yes, I'm talking about how we process and react to everything is 100% up to us. And as all this work I've been doing, as I turned 47, I just started to realize this incredible amount of power, not even empowerment, of power, not power over people, just power of, hold on, this really is all up to me. Like, the future of my life is all up to me. I don't have to be mad about that person. I don't have to hold that anger. I don't have to be scared to death every night not sleeping because I'm worried about this new variant. Not that the alternative to that is to be haphazard and careless, but I don't have to have it be the only thing I'm thinking about and be terrified of it. I can be responsibly taking the precautions I need to take and live joyfully. I can do both of those things. I don't have to let these external factors dictate the way I'm moving through life. And when I fully started to understand that, I think that is where this, like, unimaginable to me previously hopefulness came from. Not just hopefulness, like excitement and the most genuine enthusiasm I've ever felt in my whole life of, holy crap, this whole world, like, it's up to me what I want to do with it. Anyway, thank you for listening to me talk through my talk out my stuff. But I haven't talked to anybody about this. It's really awesome.
Jen, you could not be a more perfect guest. I am looking to air this actually New Year's Day, and I can't think of a more
Oh,
hopeful, inspiring, just encouraging message. And wow, that you got that at 47. I mean, I just turned 61. I'm still getting that, Jen. I still go through stuff that I go,
of course.
really?
Of course.
Isn't that what like 12-year-olds deal with?
I
What
know.
like, what on earth? Really? And people say that, age is just a number, and it is.
Mhm.
However, as we know from this pandemic, as we know from people no longer being with us, that every moment is precious and what we
Mhm.
do with it means more now. I mean, it's always meant something. It's always been important. So you've said it so succinctly and perfectly, and you answered my next question because it was going to be looking back over this time. Is there a specific point in time that you can reference where you made up your mind that you and your family just need to move forward, make your plans, and trust that it will
Mhm.
turn out? And you just said it so perfectly. And
If I can add to that, Cheryl,
sure. Oh, yeah, please.
in painting a more full picture of it, we love, as I've shared with you personally, privately, we love the place that we happened to rent when we moved back here 2 months before the world shut down. We love it, and that's the place we bought, by the way, for listeners. We bought the
Oh, I
place that we were
didn't
rent.
know that.
Yes,
Oh,
so
okay.
we didn't have
Okay.
to move, which was
Okay. That
awesome.
sheds a whole
Yes,
different light because
yes,
when you, okay.
we loved it, but I will tell you that there was no coming to the decision or coming to the closing day where we sat in the attorney's office and signed everything. That was not a calm, excited, beautiful, joyful picture the months leading up to it. Just to paint the full picture, when when the world shut down, and I was having some major significant health issues at the time, when the world shut down, and if we can put ourselves back there for a moment, which we all can easily, nobody knew what was going to happen. Would we still have jobs? Would we, how was all this going to work? We, like so many people, were living in terror of, oh my gosh, the owners of this house could come back because they've lost their job. And where the
Yes.
hell are we going to go? And we've got 2 kids. Like, it would be one thing if it was Chris and I to figure it out, but where
Yes.
are we going to go? And there was a lot of stuff going on, previous owners who we were renting from at the time with them, a lot of uncertainty about what they were doing. At one point, they were coming back and we were going to have to move this past June. And it was terror. I will tell you, terror. It was terror. So getting to the process of closing was not a big practice of gratitude. When we when we closed, we were super grateful. But alongside all of that was all this personal work that I was doing that was just, tremendous growth and all that stuff that really helped me to not actually like have to up my medication. And I say that sort of only in jest. I really, though, like, it helped me to keep things in a little bit of a perspective, and all the tools that I have learned, which is the only thing I credit all of this to, helped me to just be able to see things more for what they are rather than for what I was afraid they were going to be, which let me think clearly into getting to closing day. If any of that makes sense. Yeah.
Of course, and I don't think I've ever talked with anyone closing escrow or putting a bid on a house that was just so
Mhm.
calm, cool, and collected. If you wouldn't mind, and you've certainly touched upon that in this topic in your first episode, but because mental health these past 2 years is to say that it, in my mind, should be the number one
Mhm.
healthcare that we're addressing because of the opioid epidemic and overdose and alcoholism and
Yes.
suicide because of what this pandemic has done. And there's a whole new thing where parents and kids had to adjust to homeschooling, where you have been a homeschooler
Right.
long before the pandemic. But now there's a new thing where kids who are going back to school are having to learn how to re-engage, just the
Mhm.
opposite of what happened, having to learn to be at home. And that's causing a whole other stress. So if you have anything else that you want to share in regards to mental health self-care and the tools, you said doing
Yeah.
more personal work, if you can speak to that a little bit more, I think that would probably be helpful to some people listening.
I would love to talk about that. Here is a favor I have to ask of you, my friend, for my own as a tool in my toolbox. I am like on fire about this right now. So if I am talking too much or getting too passionate, will you just feel good about interrupting me and helping me to redirect to to whatever
Absolutely.
okay, good. Because I
Absolutely.
really am on fire about this right now. And, being on fire about anything is something my whole life I thought was like a bad thing. I thought I had to work myself out of being on fire, right?
Yes.
Because it's hot and it will burn you.
Oh my gosh, I love you.
But right now, I am really giving myself permission to be on fire about this because you know what? I'm not thinking so clearly when I talk about this. And I am so okay with that because I believe it is such an important thing for me in my life that I want to share with anybody who needs to hear it or wants to hear it or whatever, that it's okay if it's not clear. People are going to, hear what they need to hear out of the message. But I have really come to believe the following statement with like every core of my being. And just to take a 20-second preface of, I have done so much personal work. I'm not a self-help junkie. I learn the things, I put the things into practice. They become an absolute genuine tool in my toolbox and I use them. Right. So sometimes there's a tendency to just read stuff and think whatever. Like I use these tools, I apply them, and they make my life exponentially better with every tool that I learn. So I just want to say this isn't coming from a place of like flightiness or anything. This is coming from a genuine place of this is what happened in my life and I watch it happen in other people's lives. I have come to believe, I'll speak specifically to women, though I suspect the same is true for men, but that's who I engage with mostly as women. I absolutely believe mental health, not all mental health, but a lot of the mental health issues that we're dealing with that are certainly exacerbated by the pandemic are, and self-care, all of that. I believe with every core of my being that almost all of it is solvable by us understanding and developing our self-worth. I believe it to the absolute deepest part of myself because what I've noticed in my own life and in talking with others is self-care. I think we talked about this last time. Self-care, we have one picture of what it is, but for me, self-care is really learning how to set a good boundary. Learning what a boundary is, learning that a boundary doesn't come from a place of entitlement. A boundary isn't something you're afflicting on another person. A boundary is something you are doing to take care of yourself. And with self-worth comes natural boundaries. I just wrote a piece that I'm getting ready to publish about this. With self-worth comes like I will hear these boundaries coming out of my mouth and I'm like, whoa, who just said that? That was so healthy. Who just...
And yet
And I'm like, oh, it was me. It was this girl right here.
Can I interject for a moment?
Yes.
Because I love your response to that. Because there tends to be, and I'll speak for myself, there tends to
Mhm.
be at times when I set a boundary, I almost feel bad about it. Like I'm hurting someone and I shouldn't do that because that's hurting their feelings, when in fact it's honoring both of us.
Absolutely, Cheryl. Because it's truthful.
Yes. Yeah.
Because it's the truth. So this is the other thing I learned from a woman named Martha Beck. Have you heard of her?
Yes, I have.
Oh,
Yes.
she's amazing. And I read her book, The Book of Integrity. The idea she talked about was I committed to a year she said she committed to a year of always telling the truth. And I read that and I was like, yeah, right. Like, come on. Not that I'm out there lying about,
No, I get it.
and stealing, but right, exactly. And then, of course, like so many things, the more I thought about it, I thought, you know what? I'm going to try it. I am going to try always and I'm going to like start crying. I'm not even kidding. I am going to try always telling the truth. I'm just going to see what that's like. And I started always telling the truth. And what I realized is and this all relates to self-worth. When I started telling the truth, it came out naturally because it was the truth. It wasn't my spin of a truth. It wasn't me trying to be manipulative by manipulating the truth to protect somebody else's feelings. I was just telling the truth. Jen, do you have time to give me a ride to the doctor? I don't. I'm really sorry. If you want to reschedule, I can. Jen, God, did you hear what my aunt did again? But you know what? I'm in a really good space right now, and I'm so sorry I can't listen to that. All these things, they were just the truth. And it felt so different. And so the more I told the truth, the higher my self-worth got, because that's all that can happen when you tell the truth. And also, Cheryl, going back to what you were saying with the boundaries, when I am telling the truth, all anyone can feel is honesty and truth. If someone else is experiencing something different in that moment, that has nothing to do with me. I have told the truth. And so all those worries that I would have of, oh gosh, did I hurt his feelings? All the nights I would wake up at 2 a.m. and be like, oh God, I can't believe I said that. That was, how did I do? What did they feel? It all went away because none of it
Really?
mattered anymore because I told the truth. Not a variation of the truth, not a spin on it to help protect people's feelings. I told the truth. So all in like boundary setting is almost to me now like 101. Do I sound like an ass?
No, you don't, but I have a question for you
Yes,
because,
yes,
we've heard the term speak the truth in love because
yes.
there is a way to tell the truth where you blow people out of the water and people really do feel like poopy, whether you that was intentional or not. So I want to go back to something that you
Yes.
said, which is a really good example. When someone is in a negative rant, and
Mhm.
because I've been there too, where I felt really good about something, and I'll call someone, or you just happen across something and be hearing this stuff that just like, oh, my soul doesn't want this right now.
Yeah.
And to say, I'm in a really good space. I don't want to hear this. How has that been received when you do say that?
Some people get mad. People get their noses bent out of joint sometimes. But I want to clarify, and I think that's such an awesome question that you asked, Cheryl, because I spent a lot of time reflecting about that and looking for how to understand that better. So if you're brutally telling the truth, that's not the truth to me. To me, in my experience of these last, 9 months of only telling the truth is love.
Mm.
It really, really is. I'm not walking up to people and being like, that shirt, a random stranger, that shirt looks so friggin' stupid on you,
Jen,
But
I don't
if
think for a moment you'd do that. Of
I would
course.
never. Right.
What
But
were you thinking?
right, exactly. Did you think you were going to pull off that? But also, here's the interesting thing. Because I've started to realize what's my business, I would never even really think that anymore because, not that I really thought that particular example much before, but I've realized how much nobody else is any of my business. So I'm nothing. But if somebody asks me, what do you think of this shirt? I'm going to tell them I like it or I'm not crazy about it. But all that matters is how do you feel about it? Yeah.
Exactly. And also, I heard someone say once that, be careful when you give a false compliment because you just might be the recipient of the very thing that you complimented someone on, when
That's
in fact
right.
you really loathed what they were either wearing or had hanging on their wall or et cetera. So, that goes back
So
to
true, Cheryl.
just being truthful and authentic. So I want to ask you, I know could be like a hand grenade in the middle of this interview. So really don't have to answer it if you don't want to, because
Okay.
there's no right or wrong. Well, there is, but I feel like I almost have to backpedal now, but I'm just going to ask you,
Okay.
given what we're going through in this country,
Mhm.
politically and with the pandemic, how has that played out in your life as it relates to interacting with people who may not have or view what's going on with the pandemic through your same lens and the way you conduct your life?
So awesome. So awesome. So awesome. I have kept friendships and connections with family that for sure would have dried up and gone away had I not been able to recognize that what they were thinking had nothing to do with me and what I was thinking had nothing to do with them, and that neither of us knows the truth. So, understanding all of that, like at really what to me right now, it's probably always going to get deeper, but at like the deepest level, that none of what any of us are thinking has anything to do with each other has been awesome. Now, I will say that's the really pertaining to kind of the pandemic stuff, which has been a big thing I have had to work on, understanding that I didn't want to hear about it anymore, about the viewpoints and so forth. When it comes to, let's say, issues that affect women, right? The political climate around women, because that's something I can speak directly to and affects me and my children every day of my life. I have to recognize that when I am feeling attacked or exploited or any of the other negative stuff, I have to recognize that I should not be in a space where I feel attacked or exploited. So sometimes that looks like leaving a space and just saying either whatever's my truth at the moment, I've got to get going. This isn't feeling great. Or even, Cheryl, and again, this is where I'm talking about when the boundaries come out naturally and I'm like, who just said that? If I'm like, this is a really uncomfortable and unfortunate conversation, and I'm really worried that if we continue down this path, our friendship or whatever will end, can we please change the subject into something better or something different? And again, I've had family members get really, and I'm so surprised when they get mad at me. I'm not in the moment, I'm so surprised. Within a millisecond, I'm like, oh, of course they're mad that I just said that. But it comes out of me so naturally now that, again, it's my truth. And so I'm genuinely shocked when other people don't understand a boundary. And I feel like that's a little bit of a vague answer to the question that you asked, but there isn't really any other way that I can think of for me to answer that, because on a person-to-person level, which is how I understood you to ask the question, that is how all these tools and everything that I've learned to use, how they are playing out in real time during a pretty challenging time. They are literally like being just put to use all the time, to the point that somebody who is able to trigger me very easily because of past, interactions, our shared history, whatever, to the point that I'm shocked now when something will be said that is about my very worthiness of my existence as a female, as an overweight female, whatever it might be, when something is said, to the point now where I'm like, wow, that's really interesting that that's how he thinks about that. I've got to think about where that might have come from instead of being pissed off, which is wild to me. Wild. I'm 47. I was such a hothead. I'd be fire right back. I'd get so angry. But that is how it's playing out for me now, to be, I'm so much more curious with people than angry at them. And I have to tell you, as somebody who fought vehemently online, in person, my whole life about issues I believe strongly in, I believe this way is so much better for me. Being curious instead of being angry has been so much better for a million reasons.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. No, and I would absolutely concur with you. And it's so interesting because my husband and I seem to bring him up a lot in my podcast, but that's who I'm spending time with.
Yeah.
We've been quarantined together for like 19 months and really haven't had much of a
That's
life.
right.
He is my life. He's my world right now.
Yeah, yeah.
But we've had conversations about how could we have handled situations better to not lose the friendships or lose the relationships with family members that we have. And even with what you just shared, which is a really empathetic, compassionate way and much healthier. Yes,
Yeah.
much healthier way. If you seek to understand first rather than be understood, a lot of times that is what's going to bridge the gap and bring peace in relationships that will just get healthier. However, there are times where you can do your best to do that and people still don't want to receive that or be willing to engage in that agreement. Have there been relationships that you've had to say, you know what, I love you and I respect your opinion, but for my own health and my family's own health, I need to move on from this?
Yes. Yep. Just recently, just in the last few months, Cheryl, because that's the truth. It's the truth. I had a friend text me a few months ago saying, Jen, not a good friend, somebody who she understood the friendship to be one way. I didn't understand it to be that way. I thought, anyway, I may be imagining things, but it feels like we're disconnecting or something like that. And I sat there at the counter looking at the text, and we had some conversations about things. We have different shared opinions on some important things, and very, very different opinions on some other things, like core beliefs. And I sat there at the counter. Chris and Owen were sitting with me. Sydney eventually came down, and I was like, I have this text. And it was kind of when I was really in the thick of this telling the truth thing. And I had typed up a couple of responses, and I showed them to my husband and to Chris, and then eventually to Sydney. And they were like, God, that just sounds really mean. So I just kept going to myself, what's the truth? What's the truth? What's the truth? So I typed up the response, which was, you're not imagining things. I think we see life very differently, and we walk very different paths, and I don't see there being any connection or friendship for us. And that was the absolute truth. I said, I'm really sorry that you're going through what you're going through. I hope you find the tools to heal, and I just wish you and your family all the best. And and I felt so good about that message, Cheryl. I was on a high from that message. I didn't feel power over anybody, but I felt powerful because I had told the truth. I didn't go to bed that night with that feeling in my stomach or my body of like, oh my God, what is she going to say? Oh, what did I just do? I didn't wake up the next morning afraid of what the repercussions might be or the implications. There was no point where I was nervous about, oh my gosh, what if she confronts me the next time I see her? Because it was all just the truth. And I felt so good about it. And I felt good that my family saw how I handled it because it was a
Yeah, yeah.
different way to handle it. Well, it didn't go well. Let's just say it did not go well. And it was followed up with I'm chuckling not because it was funny, but because no matter how good you can feel about something, it doesn't mean it's going to go the way you think it's going to go.
Right.
It
Yeah.
followed up with a series of not relentless, that's dramatic, about 15 attack texts over a period of
Oh,
about 6 weeks and accusations
oh,
and
oh.
really, really unfortunate things. And in every moment, I just kept checking in with myself about the truth. And the truth was, I just didn't respond. I said what I needed to say. There wasn't any more that needed to be said. And I just didn't respond. And this individual just really spiraled, had clearly had some stuff going on. And so the truth that came out of that for me was working through her own stuff. We feel very differently about a lot of things. And I am so glad I shared the truth now instead of in a year. When I went through a year, and I'll tell you, Cheryl, when I was with this person, I would come home. This sounds dramatic. The last time when I finally said to Chris, my husband, I need to do something. I can't be with this person anymore. I literally came home from being with this person. I'm typically very energetic. I laid on the couch for hours. I didn't make the kids dinner. I was so drained that I couldn't do anything. And so I would have gone through however long of having all my boundaries evaded, having topics brought up that were intentionally or unintentionally kind of assaulting who I believe I am at my core, all those things that happen for a year or whatever that would just really wear me down and exhaust me. So at the end of all of that, I was never even upset by her texts because I just knew I had told the truth. So yes, that's a most recent example, but people do get mad at me. They do get mad at me when I set my boundaries. They think it's an attack on them. They think it's something personal against them when it's really just about me and my peace.
And honoring that. And it's interesting that this person unfortunately affirmed the very thing that you were
That's right.
expressing to them.
That's exactly right, Cheryl.
And I think 15 texts is kind of an assault and a
Well,
barrage.
yes.
And yeah, I think that's,
And it wasn't just text, it was Facebook messages in case I wasn't seeing the texts. I mean, it was a derailing. Yeah.
and yet look to where you've come from that you
Mhm.
have peace about that. And you
Yes.
touched upon earlier your kids going through a really tough time. And I don't know if you want to share any of that because I've also seen some really beautiful posts about your daughter and her inquiry into studying science and her inquisitiveness. And I'm not sure what's going on with your son, but if you care to share anything about your kids and what this time has meant for them, please feel free to.
Well, when we moved back, we had lived here. My kids were babies practically when we left here. They, any friends that they had, they didn't really remember, and they had all gone to school. So when we moved back 2 months before the world shut down, they didn't have any friends here. And that wasn't uncommon because all the kids were shut in. But my daughter did okay with that. And my son really struggled and had a really hard time and was very unhappy, as I know all the kids were. This isn't a unique thing, but not all the kids. That's not true. Introverted people like my daughter loved the pandemic, when we all had to be home. She thought it was phenomenal. Although she even reached a point where she was like, Mom, we need some friends here. Like, we need some people to be in real life. Like, the online stuff is great, but we need some people to be in the physical presence of. And we ended up starting a park day for homeschoolers that is still going almost however many, 16 months later. We meet every single Tuesday, and it's an awesome group, and it's a huge silver lining that came out of all of this. But, other than that, one of the things that I think has been really cool about this pandemic for us is I think everybody is a lot more flexible in general. So pre-pandemic, We've always homeschooled. We do something called unschooling, which is complete life-based learning. We don't use curriculum. We don't use anything. My kids learn entirely from life, and it's awesome and so fun. They're with me all the time learning. And pre-pandemic, there was a lot of thoughts and judgment about what people's days should look like, what they should be doing. And now there is a lot less of that, which actually gives us more freedom to move through the world in the way that's comfortable for us, which has been awesome. And so none of it is my story to share at this point. So I'm not going to go into details, but my son has been so happy with all the friends he's made. My daughter too. Like, they've made these terrific friends that are just so happy. But my daughter just turned 12, and all of us women can remember what turning 12 is like,
Oh,
and all these
yes.
things that are happening and
Yes.
how hard it is.
Oh, yes. That's why I laugh. I'm not
Right, I get it.
I'm
I
just
know.
going, if someone
Out of
offered me the
yes.
yeah, if someone offered me the opportunity to go back, but no, thank you.
No, thank
No,
you.
not in no.
And in fact, Cheryl, as she was even getting 7, 8, 9, I'm like, if there were a pill I could give her to avoid what's coming, I
Right.
would give it to her because it sucks so bad. And my daughter is this amazing, reflective. She is so wise. She get not in an irresponsible way where she's parenting me or anything like that, but she gives me perspectives and insight on things that just are so helpful and blow me away. And she just turned 12, and she's got all these things that are going on and different feelings and figuring out her place in the world and what that looks like in the context of different relationships and what different relationships do to her. And she's an extreme introvert, very social. She's friendly, and, introvert doesn't mean shy. She's not shy. She's an introvert. She needs a lot of time to herself to recharge. And she really likes being with her friends. So going through this really weird place of all of that. But what I like about what the pandemic has done is I feel like people are more open now when I say, you know what, family member, we actually can't see you on Saturday. We've had a really, really full week, and Sydney's really needing the day to recharge. I feel like people are more supportive of that now than pre-pandemic. And I don't know if that's because everybody understands it more on the importance of mental health and honoring that. I don't know where it comes from, but I feel like people are more supportive of it.
I think people are more flexible and supportive of a lot of things that they
Yeah.
weren't before because they get it. And there's some who aren't. There's some who
Mhm.
are actually more agitated and,
True.
but I think they would be that way whether it was a pandemic or not.
That's it.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, some people are never going to do their work. They're never going to do any work on themselves, and that's just who they are. That's okay.
And even if you are doing work, it's such a process sometimes. I mean, you spoke from such a powerful, strong place of getting it right from the start. And for some people, it's lifelong. Some people, it's, whatever. As long as you are striving to do, I will say we or I, striving to do the work and be better humans. And you made a very interesting comment. And I appreciate that you did this, because I will say this sometimes when, especially if I find people want to fall into gossip, and I could see myself going there, and I have to stop myself. You said the phrase, it's not my story to tell.
Mhm.
And to protect your kids like that is so cool because,
Aw.
yeah, well, really, Jen, because as parents,
It is.
it'd be easy to say, well, I'm their parent. Of course I can say this.
Yes.
But you respected them as individuals to say, that's not my story to tell. And I just want to acknowledge that in you.
Thank you for seeing that, Cheryl, because it is not something that is genuinely appreciated. Quite the opposite usually. And I really appreciate that you just saw that and called that out and recognized it. And I believe it is so important to respect our kids that way. I really do. So thank you for noticing that and sharing it and appreciating it. Really, that again brought tears to my eyes. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Well, I will send you a box of tissues when we when we end this, or maybe I'll send you a case, courtesy
Would be
of,
more fitting.
we'll call it 19 tears.
Right.
So before we wrap up, I can't even believe almost an hour has gone by. I'm blown away because I feel like we could speak for hours, and you were just so wonderful and delightful. On our last episode, we chatted about your 2 guinea pig fur babies, and you've actually since then
Yes.
added to your family with a third. And your most recent Instagram pics with them in their Christmas attire is so adorable. And I'm wondering if the stage mom in you, Jen,
Oh, yeah.
has any aspirations for publishing a calendar or greeting cards with them on it.
Funny you should say that
Oh,
because
no, come on.
oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, sure. My kids don't want a stage mom. My guinea pigs don't have a voice, and I'm okay with that. But we have a local guinea pig sanctuary, and I just had thought, maybe I'll do something as a fundraiser, do something, because they're all so cute, and we've got some phenomenal photos that I think
Yes,
could
you
raise some
do.
money for the
Yes, you
sanctuary.
do. Yes, you
Yes.
do.
So, so we very well may. Cheryl, I know we need to end. Can I just add one preface to all of this?
Oh, yeah.
At the end.
Yeah.
For anybody who maybe didn't listen to the first episode, I want to be really clear that the first 43 years of my life were rotten, like really not good. I was people pleaser is the funny, silly term we put on it. I was living my life for other people 100% of the time. I was wildly irresponsible because I was always trying to do for other people. I was unhappy all of the time. I had horrible anxiety, terrible insomnia, fortunate to have some good relationships in spite of it all, but life was really not good for me in a million billion ways. And the only reason I want to say that is when you hear the after, there's never an end, but this is my after through a lot of work and self-discovery and all that. But when you hear the after and you look at the after and you come in at the after, it's really easy to think this has been the always. And this has not been my always. I've been very lucky, very privileged in so many ways. But the first 43 years until I had my bad mental breakdown, were not good. And I want to say that so that the realness of everything I've shared up to this point, or like you say on social media, like it's all real. And I feel like the only way to really prove that's real is by reminding people of the truth that I write and speak openly about. I don't hide it at all, of the reality and truth of how bad things were before the after.
I am so glad you said that, Jen, because
Mhm.
one of the questions that I ask pretty much every guest, and I believe I asked you this as well, is, if there's a time in your life that you could think of, I used to say epic fail, and I thought I didn't like that, but less successful that informed you of the next right step because of what you just said. We look at happy, successful. And when I say successful, if you're happy with who you are right now at 47, that's to me the epitome of success because everything else is just the icing on the cake. But if you look at happy, successful people and tend to think that they're always like that, they've lived a charmed life, they've never known adversity.
That's right.
Everything has just been, and there are a couple of people, I have met a few people in my life,
Absolutely.
but they are the exception, not
Yes,
the
they are.
norm.
Yes.
And I don't begrudge them either. There's only, the difference is I wouldn't seek counsel about things
That's
that
right.
they could never relate to because they've just never gone through it. Why? How would they relate to it?
Yes.
So
Yes.
that is so key what you just said, and I
Mhm.
appreciate you saying that.
Yes, yes. And I love what you said about not seeking counsel from the people who are, for whatever reason, faking it, right? Faking it. And I think it's so great to think about being discerning and evaluative. Is that a word? Evaluating when people are speaking or posting or writing or whatever about something that seems too good to be true. I find it super helpful to reflect and do a little curious investigating about, is it actually too good to be true? Are they faking? Or is this real? And if this is real, then I want to listen to them and follow them. And I want to be grateful for how much they're talking about it because it can be real.
Oh my gosh, woman. I am so excited that we have connected, that this is going to be the first episode of the new year. It's very hopeful. It's very inspiring. Jen, you are the real deal. Anybody who has spent any time either listening to your podcasts, reading your blogs, watching your pictures, you do not pull, you don't pull any punches in a good way. That is the true form of love and empathy, is if we can respect each other enough to say, this is working. However, it could be working even better if we did this, or it's not working, and move on with grace, extending grace to one another, because that is so needed right now. And I think it's the healthiest thing we can do. So is there anything else you would like to say before we say goodbye?
Always. But
Okay.
But I won't. All I will say is what I say, I think, every time I talk to you, Cheryl, that I'm so grateful that we connected. And I'm saying this knowing listeners are listening because I'm so grateful we connected. And I am so grateful that you took the steps to get over the getting ready and put your podcast out and have your voice be shared and heard. And I know how much thought and intention and attention you put into your relationships, podcast, not podcast, and your life. And I know how much you think about and value your relationships with people, and that you reflect on how you can do things differently and better and this and that. And I'm so grateful for you. I really am, Cheryl. And when we were getting ready to, schedule this, I was just so looking forward to, I was so happy to put it on my calendar and so looking forward to getting to spend any time with you, even though, I am the jibber jabber who talks all the time. But I'm grateful for you. I'm so grateful that you're in this world and in my world.
I don't need to say any more other than right back at you, my dear, seriously. And you are my guest. You are supposed to jibber jabber. I love that, jibber jabber. And I want to share a compliment that someone gave me because it would not have existed without you once again encouraging me to do this. And someone who's a first-time listener, she wrote me and said, I just came across your podcast. It was exactly what I needed for today. I can't thank you enough for putting this content out. And I thought of you immediately. I thought, I'm going to be talking with Jen soon. I want to make sure and tell you that, because if it wasn't for you, and that's the ripple effect, that's the positive effect we have in this world. When we do encourage each other, when we speak our truth, when we encourage each other to speak our truth and to just get out there and shine with no apology, because it's going to have an effect on somebody else that we can't even fathom. So on behalf of that listener, on behalf of other people who've listened, and certainly on behalf of myself, I just want to thank you, Jen. You are a joy. You're a blessing. I'm so happy about your new home and how your kids are doing and your fur babies. And I can't wait to see the calendar and how you're going to get them to slide down the pole. I don't know, but
oh, Cheryl. I'm rubbing my hands together in a thinking kind of way.
Nope. Said it couldn't be risque. Pigs on poles.
Oh,
anyway.
My God. Oh, boy. Okay. Interesting.
On that note, a very, very happy, and I feel like I really have to say this more and more and more, healthy 2022, my dear.
Thank you, Cheryl. Same to you and Mark.
Thank you. I'd also like to thank the following news outlets for the use of their clips and so aptly painting the picture of the fear that we're facing during this pandemic. BBC, PBS, Now This, UNESCO, and Some Good News. I especially want to thank Joel and Luke Smallbone, otherwise known as the Group for King and Country, for allowing me to use an excerpt of their song Together, which could not be a more hopeful and inspiring song for such a time as this. Finally, I'll leave you with the following from Proverbs 23:18. Surely there is a future, and your hope will not be cut off. Thank you again for joining me today. Feel free to offer feedback or a story idea at 19stories@soundsatchelstudios.com, via Instagram at Cheryl Halling VO. I look forward to sharing more stories on the next episode of 19 Stories from Fear to Hope. Until then, stay healthy and hopeful.
Together with our differences, together we are bolder, braver, stronger.